There we go. We've just hit a new all-time high in Bitcoin, and I'm getting the usual questions, especially by the premium members recently. They're asking me, does it make sense to still buy since we've already risen so high? Does it rather make sense to wait for a retracement, try to buy in lower, or should we buy high and ride this current momentum? The way I think about these questions always, I want to have a strategy around things, right? You don't want to answer these kind of things spontaneously. You want to have an approach to how to, in general, navigate this. And the way I personally approach this is with target allocations. So I'm thinking about my portfolio as a whole, not just in terms of crypto, but I also think about property, I think about stocks, potentially precious metals. So I think about what kind of different assets do you own and what's the allocation to each of those assets. And then you think about what kind of risk am I willing to take for the very long-term time horizon. So am I okay with, say, 30% allocation to crypto? Or do I rather want to be between, say, 5 to 10%? Or am I even okay to temporarily have 50% allocation to crypto? What kind of allocation is okay for me given the historical volatility? Because crypto can easily drop 70, 80%, right? How much am I okay for my overall wealth, or my overall portfolio to drop? And the more volatility you can stomach, of course, the more crypto exposure you can have. Now, it's not that great, I believe, to simply have just a static number here. So to simply just think, okay, I want to have 10% of all of my wealth in crypto. I think it's better to think about this in terms of ranges. So I want to have between, say, 5% and 20% in crypto. And depending on where I currently see the market, if I see the market being very cheap, then I want to be rather at the 20% side. If I think the market might be heated, then you rather want to be on the lower side. And if you don't have a strong opinion about the market at the moment, then simply just go with your average, right? If it's between 5 and 20, then the average would be 12.5, right? So think about this in general first in terms of ranges. Now, currently, we are obviously not dirt cheap. That was after we have dropped 70% and Bitcoin was at 16K. Are we now incredibly heated? Probably not either, right? Because we've just hit the all-time high again, but that was after a very prolonged bear market. And typically what happens after prolonged bear markets when we hit the all-time high is a continued rally of at least another 2x, maybe if we're lucky, another 3x. And there's also a lot of very positive signs, right? We've got a lot of money inflow in the stablecoins. We've got a lot of purchases through the Bitcoin ETFs. So the signs look very bullish. That being said, we're not dirt cheap. So think about this fundamentally simply. If you have already allocated quite a bit to Bitcoin or to crypto in general, and you have ridden this wave to a degree, and now your portfolio allocation is rather at the upper end, then it might make sense to simply just rebalance. If you had already been under-allocated in the first place, then of course you could buy now and restore the allocation, but you have to be okay to buy even more in case we crash. Right? Let's say we are now at our 72K, we then crash down suddenly for whatever random reason, right? Maybe the financial markets, traditional finance suddenly crashes because we didn't have this on the radar. I don't know, commercial property suddenly sells off, whatever the reason is, right? Banking crisis, we have no idea. There's suddenly a black swan event and traditional markets crash, and maybe with a delay, crypto might also get involved in this whole tight liquidity squeeze. Now let's say Bitcoin suddenly drops 50% out of the blue. Would you be okay to buy that bottom? And if you work with those target allocations and we suddenly drop 50%, you should be saying, okay, now I want to be on the upper end of my target allocation, and I'd have to move some of my stock allocation then back to Bitcoin, right? Or back to crypto. So this is how to think about this fundamentally. You want to have a balanced portfolio, you want to monitor your risk properly, and you shouldn't look back in case you miss out on some of the gains because you had to rebalance because you were already over allocated. But if you didn't allocate properly in the first place and you didn't ride the wave sufficiently, just waiting for a drop isn't that sensible either, because we never know if it drops or not, right? If we simply just look at the Bitcoin price and prior rallies, very often we saw the rallies pretty much uninterrupted. We simply just climbed from high after high after high. Then if you waited for too long, you simply missed out. And then you really get the FOMO, right? The reason why we get all these questions now is simply because people feel FOMO. They feel, I should have bought more. And everybody feels this to a degree, right? Everybody feels like, yeah, I maybe bought enough Bitcoin, but I could have taken on a personal loan and buy a bit more, right? And I didn't do it. There's all kinds of justifications, but in the moment, we simply did what appeared right at the time. The most important thing is to simply just follow a strategy and to be okay with that strategy. Think about this deeply and don't think about this in the moment when emotions are very high, right? In general, crypto tends to move in waves, and in general, the trend is your friend. As in, if we are currently rising, we tend to continue to rise. So that's why moving averages, for example, work, right? If the price is currently above the moving average, in general, the price continues to rise, and vice versa. If we are below a moving average, in general, we tend to go below. And this is true for pretty much any moving average duration. It's true for the 50-day, for the 100-day, for the 200-day. The best simple moving average for Bitcoin, by the way, is the 120-day simple moving average after I've done several backtests on this. So this works, as in we are now going up. So yes, we are more likely to continue to go up than go down. So yes, if you're currently underallocated, it might make sense to buy. But at the same time, you need to be allocated to a degree that in case we do not go further up from here, right? Nobody knows about this for sure. It's just a matter of probabilities and of not thinking about this too deterministically, right? In case we do not go up, but we actually do see this random crash, will you be okay to buy in? And that's the hard question, because if you didn't allocate enough in the first place, do you actually have strong enough of a conviction to buy in case of a crash? Did your mind change enough? Did you learn enough about Bitcoin and crypto to be okay to buy the bottom when everybody gets scared? Because if you're now suddenly just FOMOing in because the price went up, then probably your conviction isn't strong enough to continue to allocate again if you're crashing. Because that's what happens with your target allocations, right? If Bitcoin crashes, then suddenly your target allocation might be much higher than your actual allocation and you would have to buy the dip. So this is how I think about this. This is how you can make sense of this. You always want to monitor your allocation. You always want to monitor your risk. And you simply just adjust. If we go too high, take some profit. If we are crashing, double down. Over the next 5, 10, 15 years, Bitcoin is very likely going to still be around. Now traditional finance is in this as well. BlackRock makes tons of money with the fees. The Bitcoin ETF had been pretty much the most successful ETF launch in history. So Bitcoin will stay around. Dips will come. Profit taking will come. Just make sure that you don't act emotionally, but that you actually have some kind of a system. And I personally simply use those target allocations. If you found this useful, feel free to give this a thumbs up. It helps the channel grow. And feel free to also subscribe in case you're new here. Cheers.